I'm Olivia, 35, and that night was supposed to be a celebration. Not just of my birthday, but of everything I'd quietly endured and finally overcome. Our new place in Napa had this big wraparound yard lined with string lights and trimmed lavender bushes, and my husband Nate made sure every detail of the party reflected me. Handcrafted lemon cake from my favorite bakery, a jazz trio playing Coltrane under the trees, and friends I hadn't seen in months gathered with wine glasses and warm hugs. I wore a deep emerald dress Nate picked out, and for the first time in years, I actually felt seen. Not just as a nurse pulling night shifts and fixing everything for everyone, but as a woman who'd finally made space for her own joy. The moment felt whole. Then Dean showed up. He was late, of course. That wasn't a surprise, but something about how he walked in, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, a champagne flute in hand before even saying hi, made my stomach knot. He didn't greet me. Didn't acknowledge Nate, just drifted across the backyard like he owned the place and landed in a corner, standing under the fig tree, glaring. I tried to ignore it. This was my night. I'd promised myself nothing would steal it. People laughed and danced, old friends told stories about college and late-night drives down Highway 1, and for a while it worked. I floated through the party, touched by everyone's presence, especially knowing how far I'd come from working double shifts just to afford nursing school. But I could feel Dean watching me, studying me, like he was waiting for his moment. That moment came right when I stood by the outdoor fireplace, raising a glass to thank everyone for coming. "I just want to say," I began, my voice warm. "This year has been hard, but this night, this right here makes it all feel worth it." That's when I heard the glass shatter. I turned. Dean had hurled his champagne flute across the table. The lemon cake, the one Nate drove 45 minutes to get, was now a crumpled, frosted mess under a pile of glass and liquor. He was already moving, stomping toward me, wild-eyed. "You think you're better than us?" he spat, his voice slurred but sharp. "Throwing parties in wine country like you're royalty?" The yard fell silent. Even the jazz trio stopped mid-note. Nate stepped forward instinctively, but I caught his arm. I couldn't stop looking at Dean. Or maybe I couldn't look away. Not because I was scared, but because it was finally happening. The explosion I'd spent years trying to prevent. "You always act like you're above the rest of us," Dean continued, pointing at the guests. "Look at this. Fancy dress. Fancy house. Like you're too good for the family that made you." He was yelling now. People shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew none of them would matter to him. My mom rushed over, not to me, to him. "Dean, sweetheart," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him like he was the one who'd been wounded. "It's okay, you're just upset." Dad followed, placing a firm hand on Dean's back. "He just needs to let it out," he said calmly, like we were in therapy, not standing ankle-deep in broken glass and ruined cake. Nate looked at me, then at them, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" he muttered, voice low. Dean shrugged off their hands and stumbled back toward the drinks table. I could feel everyone watching me. I cleared my throat. "Thank you again, everyone," I said, forcing the smile back. "Please, enjoy yourselves. Music?" Nate gestured to the band. The saxophone picked back up hesitantly. The rest of the night blurred. Guests tried to pretend nothing happened. Some left early, mumbling excuses. Others stayed, out of guilt or confusion. I couldn't tell. Dean eventually disappeared into the house. I didn't follow. I wasn't chasing him anymore. Later, while Nate and I cleaned up shattered cake from the patio stones, I didn't cry. I just asked, "Do you still think I overreacted when I said I wanted to stop sending him money?" He didn't answer at first. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, I think you've waited too long." That night, after we locked up, I opened my laptop. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to post anything. I was just going to start. one click at a time, quietly untying the knots I'd spent years tying for Dean. No more excuses, no more, he's just going through something, no more damage control. By morning, he was going to find out what it looked like when the sister who always fixed things stopped. And for once, I didn't feel guilty about it. The morning after the party, the patio still smelled faintly of wine and citrus from the spilled champagne. I stood barefoot near the broken glass Nate had swept into a corner the night before, staring at the table where the lemon cake used to be. It looked like a crime scene, and in some ways, it was. "You don't have to do this today," Nate said gently, setting a cup of coffee on the edge of the table. "I do," I said. "If I don't now, I never will." He didn't argue. He knew me well enough to know once I made up my mind, I didn't back down. Back inside, I opened a drawer in my home office and pulled out a manila folder labeled Dean. It was a thick one. Inside were years of loan agreements I'd typed up, every one of them signed by Dean, and none ever honored. 15 grand over the past 5 years. Rent help, car repairs, even tuition for a sound engineering course he dropped out of 3 weeks in. I kept receipts, emails, text screenshots. Not because I expected to ever take him to court, I never planned to, but because some small part of me had always known this would come to a head. I wasn't always like this. I didn't always document everything. But when you spend years trying to justify your kindness to people who call it control, you start building evidence. For yourself, if nothing else. Dean wasn't always like this either. When we were kids growing up in Santa Rosa, he was the golden one. Charismatic, free-spirited, adored by my parents. I was the responsible one. The planner, the fixer, the one who got good grades and took care of things. Mom used to say, "Dean just needs more time. He's sensitive. You've always been the strong one, Olivia." That line haunted me. "You've always been the strong one." It sounds like a compliment. It's not. It's a license, a burden, a reminder that everyone else gets to crumble and you don't. The truth is, I wasn't always strong. I just didn't have a choice. I remembered the first time Dean asked me for money. It was 7 years ago. I was still a floor nurse, pulling 12-hour shifts and trying to save up for grad school. Dean had just moved to LA and claimed he had an audition with a producer who totally saw potential. He needed $800 for a deposit on a shared studio apartment. "I'll pay you back in 2 months, Max," he said, voice dripping with charm over the phone. I wired the money that night. He never mentioned it again. From there, it spiraled. Guitar repairs, travel expenses, legal fees after a bar fight. Each time, he promised it was the last. Each time, I believed him. Until I didn't. The night before my wedding, Dean showed up late to the rehearsal dinner wearing sunglasses indoors and reeking of weed. He gave a toast where he barely mentioned me and ended by saying, "Olivia always thought she was better than the rest of us, but I guess now she's got a husband who agrees." People laughed awkwardly. My mom clapped like he was doing stand-up. I cried in the bridal suite that night while Nate rubbed my back in silence. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For giving him a microphone." After that, I tried to cut back. I didn't stop helping, but I set limits. No cash, only direct payments, no more co-signing anything, no more recommending him to friends. But then he'd show up with those sad eyes and some sob story, and I'd fold. "You're not his lifeline," Nate would say, again and again. "You're his excuse." And now, after the party, after the cake and the screaming and the glass, there was no excuse left. Around noon, I got a text from my mom. "Dean's sorry. He was just overwhelmed. You know how sensitive he is." "No. Are you okay?" "No. I'm sorry he ruined your party." Just a message reminding me to put his needs ahead of mine. Again. I didn't reply. An hour later, I got another message, this time from Dean. "Sorry about the cake. I was drunk. But you should know, you've always acted like you're better. That's what set me off. I stared at the screen, the rage sitting cold in my chest. Not regret, not apology, just blame, just more of the same. That evening, I called my accountant. "Remember that family fund account we set up for emergencies?" I asked. "Yeah," she said cautiously. "You want to add more?" "No," I said. "I want to lock it. No more transfers. Not to anyone but me." She didn't ask questions, just said, "Understood." I shut down the account Dean used to access and updated all the passwords. Then I opened the last email I ever planned to send him. "Dean, I love you. I always have. But I won't be your fallback anymore. You've broken every boundary I set, and last night was the final straw. This isn't a punishment. It's a consequence. I wish you healing, but from now on, you're on your own. Olivia." I hovered over the send button for 5 seconds. Then I clicked. The reply came at 2 a.m. Wow. "Cold. Don't expect me to forgive this." I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my laptop and lay in bed beside Nate, who was already asleep. I watched the ceiling fan turn slowly overhead, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. I thought cutting Dean off would bring peace. I was wrong. The silence after my email lasted 2 days. 2 whole days where I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, he'd taken it in. That maybe he was finally waking up to the mess he'd made. Then the backlash began. It started with a Facebook post. A vague, poetic pity party dripping with manipulation. Funny how the people you've always supported turn their backs on you the moment you're struggling. Family shouldn't come with conditions. He didn't tag me, but he didn't have to. Anyone who knew us, and plenty who didn't, could connect the dots. The comments came fast. "You deserve better, Dean. Some people just don't understand what being there for family really means." "Sending love, bro. Been there." I stared at the screen, stunned. This man destroyed my birthday party, smashed a cake, threw a tantrum in front of 50 people. And somehow, he was the victim? Nate walked in as I was reading. "Don't look at that stuff," he said, putting a coffee in front of me. "It's poison." "I need to know what he's doing," I said quietly. "He's not just ranting. He's building a narrative." Nate sat down across from me. "And what's your narrative?" I didn't answer. I didn't have one. I'd spent so long staying silent, taking hits for the sake of family, that I'd forgotten how to speak up for myself. Later that day, my cousin Leah called. We hadn't spoken in over a year. "Hey, Liv," she said, her voice careful. "Mind if I ask, what happened at your party? Dean posted something that made me look like the villain?" I cut in. "I didn't say that," she replied. I saw people talking. I figured I'd go straight to the source." So I told her, all of it, the money, the lies, the manipulation, the shattered glass on my lawn. She was quiet for a long time. "I had no idea," she said finally. "He makes it sound like you abandoned him." "He's abandoned himself," I said. "I just stopped enabling it." That night, I got a call from my mom. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. Finally, a text popped up. "Please don't shut us out. We just want to talk." I sat at the kitchen table, Nate beside me, and stared at the words until they blurred. I knew what talk meant. It meant guilt. It meant pressure. It meant them defending Dean, because that's what they always did. The next day, they showed up at my house unannounced. Nate was the one who answered the door. I was still upstairs, hair wet from the shower, when he called out, "Your parents are here." I came down slowly, towel drying my hands. My mom was on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. My dad stood near the window, pretending to admire our bookshelf like he hadn't just ambushed me. "We just want to understand," my mom said. "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you want to convince me I'm being cruel?" She flinched. Dean's hurting. And I'm not? I snapped. Dad cleared his throat. He needs support. He had support, I said. He had 15 grand. A record label meeting I arranged. My time, my energy, my birthday, and he spit on it. You've always been stronger, Mom whispered. There it was again, that same tired phrase. And you've always used that as an excuse to ignore when I'm hurting, I replied. They didn't stay long after that. My words didn't explode. They landed like a quiet final verdict. They left with a hug I didn't return. 3 days later, Dean posted another video, this time on TikTok. He was sitting in his car, a guitar in the passenger seat, eyes red-rimmed and glassy. I've been through a lot lately. Some people who were supposed to be in my corner bailed on me when I needed them most. But I'm not giving up. He added a GoFundMe link. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He's fundraising now? Nate asked. Using our fallout as marketing, I muttered. Of course. Friends started texting. Some were supportive. Others danced around the issue. Hope you and Dean patch things up soon. Families fight, but love wins, right? I stopped replying. By the end of the week, I deleted my Facebook, then Instagram. Not because I was ashamed, but because I refused to share a platform with someone turning my boundaries into clickbait. Still, the hurt sat heavy. One night, I sat alone in the living room, lights off, scrolling through old pictures. Dean and I as kids. Him holding a sparkler at age 10, me beside him with braces and a gap-toothed grin. There was love once. Pure, easy love. But love without respect curdles into something toxic. I heard footsteps. Nate sat beside me, handing me a blanket. You don't have to mourn what he's become, he said gently. That's not your fault. I miss who he could have been, I said. Nate nodded. But you don't owe that version of him your peace. I leaned into him, the ache still there, but not as sharp. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I made a decision. I couldn't erase Dean's posts. I couldn't control our parents. But I could speak. I could own my truth. Not to convince others, but to free myself. And I knew exactly where to start. I didn't plan to go public. That's never been who I am. I'm a nurse. Steady, practical, private. I don't post my emotions online or share cryptic quotes hoping someone asks what's wrong. But when Dean turned my life into a storyline, when people who barely knew me started weighing in, something inside me snapped. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, for myself, for the people who mattered, for the little girl I used to be who always kept quiet to keep the peace. So I opened my laptop and started typing. It wasn't dramatic, just the truth. I've stayed quiet out of respect for my family, but after weeks of vague posts and public shaming, I want to speak plainly. Last month, my brother showed up to my birthday party, threw champagne across the yard, smashed a gift my husband gave me, and screamed insults in front of my friends, coworkers, and neighbors. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern that's been building for years: manipulation, financial abuse, guilt trips, and public scenes. I've supported my brother emotionally and financially for over a decade, giving thousands of dollars toward his career dreams while working night shifts and building a life from the ground up. I set a boundary. He broke it. I'm not ashamed for saying enough. I'm proud. I hope this encourages someone else who's afraid to walk away from toxicity just because it's family. I hit post and immediately turned my phone over. My heart was pounding like I'd run a marathon. I didn't care if it got 1,000 views or none. It wasn't for likes. It was for me. Within an hour, the messages began. Some were quiet. Private DMs from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Thank you for saying this. I needed to hear it. My sister is like your brother. I've never had the guts to walk away. You're not alone. A few were harsher, mostly from people tied to Dean, friends of his from old bands, mutual contacts from high school. You didn't have to drag him like that. Family fights. It's normal. I didn't respond, because it wasn't normal. Not when it eats away at your sleep. Not when you're paying rent for someone who trashes your house. Not when your own parents act like you're the problem for finally saying no. The next day, I went into work at the clinic like usual. Patients don't care about your drama. They care if you listen, if you're gentle with the IV, if you remember they hate needles. I was grateful for the routine. During my lunch break, I opened my email and saw a subject line from the Austin Advocate, a local newsletter I subscribed to but never interacted with. We saw your post. Would you be open to writing a short op-ed on setting boundaries with toxic family members? I blinked, then reread it 3 times. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't an expert. I didn't have a PhD in family psychology or a TED Talk on resilience, but I had lived it, and maybe that was enough. So I said yes. Writing the piece was cathartic. I didn't go into every gritty detail. I didn't name Dean, but I laid out the emotional toll of being the strong one in a family that treats boundaries like betrayal. I explained how enabling someone isn't the same as loving them, and I ended with this. You don't have to light yourself on fire to keep your family warm. The piece went live on Monday morning. By noon, it had been shared 800 times. By Tuesday, it was trending locally under a hashtag I hadn't created. #BoundariesAreBrave. It was surreal. Nurses, teachers, small business owners, women like me, were commenting and sharing their own stories. Some had blocked siblings. Some had walked away from parents. Some were still in the trenches, whispering, "Thank you," from behind anonymous usernames. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. That night, I curled up on the couch with Nate, watching the sunset pour gold across the hills outside Santa Rosa. "You proud of yourself?" he asked, rubbing my feet. "I am," I whispered. And I was. Not because I'd gone viral, but because I had finally taken control of my story. Then my phone rang. It was Dean. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Seconds later, a text popped up. "Nice article. Hope your 15 minutes were worth it." Followed by another. "This isn't over." I showed the texts to Nate. He read them, then looked at me. "Do you want to block him?" I shook my head. "No, let him watch." I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't playing his game. But I wanted him to know something had shifted. I wasn't his silent sister anymore. A few days later, I got a call from my Aunt Meredith. She was my dad's older sister, sharp-tongued and fiercely independent, the black sheep of the family who'd moved to Seattle when I was a kid. "I read your piece," she said without pleasantries. "You've got guts." "Thanks," I replied, unsure where this was going. "You know," she continued, "when your dad was younger, he always covered for Dean Sr. too. Your grandfather was a mess, drinking, gambling. Your dad protected him until it destroyed their relationship. He swore he wouldn't repeat that pattern." I sat there, stunned. "He doesn't even see it," she said. "But he is repeating it, just with your brother." I didn't know what to say. "You broke the cycle," she said softly. "Be proud of that." After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen and just breathed for a while. There was so much history I'd never been told, so many unspoken wounds in our family tree. But now I was digging up the roots, not to destroy, but to plant something stronger. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, because while Dean was busy playing victim, I was building something real, a life where peace wasn't a luxury, it was a standard, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. The morning after the article went live, I stepped into the break room at the clinic and felt the shift immediately. Carla, the receptionist who usually greeted me with a sleepy, "Hey," looked up, wide-eyed. "You really wrote that?" I paused, coffee cup halfway to the machine. "Wrote what?" She turned her phone toward me. My op-ed was open on her screen, shared from one of those inspirational Instagram pages with 500,000 followers. I hadn't even known it had been picked up. Wow, I said quietly. Yeah, I did. Carla smiled, nodding. Good for you. I smiled back, but inside I was tense. Not because I regretted it. I didn't. But because I knew this wasn't the end. If anything, I'd kicked a hornet's nest. And sure enough, by the time I got home, the fallout had already begun. My mom's number lit up my screen with 5 missed calls. Then a text. Call me. This has gone too far. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at it. I hadn't heard her say those exact words since I was 15 and had told my aunt about my brother stealing from my room. Back then, she'd begged me not to make it a family issue, not to shame Dean, not to go too far. History was repeating. I called her back. Her voice was calm but cold. I read your little article, she said, like she was saying she found something filthy in the laundry. It's not an article, I said. It's my story. It's a public attack on your own family. No, Mom, it's an honest account of what happened, of what's been happening. You think airing dirty laundry makes you strong? She snapped. You think humiliating your brother helps anything? I clenched my jaw. He's been humiliating me for years. You just didn't want to see it. She went quiet for a beat. You should be ashamed of yourself. I wasn't surprised, but I still felt that familiar pang. The one that always came when my mom chose silence over protection, image over truth. I'm not, I said finally. Not anymore. I hung up before she could respond. Later that night, Nate and I curled up on the couch, trying to enjoy a quiet dinner. But his phone buzzed halfway through the meal. It was a DM request from someone neither of us recognized. Some guy named Travis who'd played in a band with Dean 5 years ago. Tell your wife to chill. She's ruining his life. Then another one. Dean's struggling. You people are just rich and bored. We weren't rich, and I was never bored. I was tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of being cast as the villain for finally standing up for myself. Tired of the whispers behind screens from people who never showed up to help when Dean was bouncing checks with my name on them. A few days later, I got a call from my cousin Hannah, one of the few relatives I still spoke to. She lived in Portland and had a toddler and a job in HR. She was calm, level-headed. I just got off the phone with my mom, she said. Apparently Dean told the family that you're suing him? I blinked. What? Yeah, she sighed. He said you're trying to ruin him legally. I didn't believe it, obviously, but others are starting to whisper. I felt my stomach turn. That's insane. I know. But Olivia, he's painting this as a war. You're the big bad CEO. He's the struggling artist. It's playing well with certain people. I laughed, short and sharp. He's not even struggling. My parents just paid off his credit card. Hannah paused. They did? $6,000. Quietly, behind my back. Jesus, she muttered. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I said. But it just never ends. That night, I sat by the window in our Santa Rosa home, watching the fog roll in. I used to love that quiet mist, the way it made everything feel a little softer. But tonight, it felt like it was wrapping around me like a warning. Dean was spiraling, and he wanted to take me with him. Nate brought me tea and sat beside me. You know what this is, right? What? It's a campaign. He's rallying troops, and he's not even subtle. He's desperate. He's dangerous. I nodded, not in the criminal sense, but emotionally. He was a grenade with the pin halfway pulled. A few days later, my clinic's HR manager pulled me aside. Just a heads up, she said carefully. We've been getting strange reviews online. Nothing serious, but a few fake accounts saying you're unstable, that you lash out at patients. My mouth went dry. I know it's nonsense, she added quickly. Your record is spotless. We're flagging and removing them. But I wanted you to know. I thanked her and went back to my station, hands shaking. Dean wasn't just trying to shame me socially. He was trying to ruin my livelihood. That night, I looked Nate in the eye and said, "We need to get ahead of this." He nodded. "What are you thinking?" "Documentation, screenshots, dates. Proof of every transfer, every message, every favor." He got to work with me, pulling up files. I printed receipts from my bank, thousands sent to Dean's account. I printed emails where I'd vouched for him. I even saved the screenshots of his rants and fake reviews. If he was going to take this public, I was going to meet him with truth. Not drama, not insults, facts. The last straw came on a Sunday morning. I woke up to a message from my uncle, a quiet, kind man who rarely got involved. "Olivia, I know it's not my place, but Dean's going around saying you threatened him. He's telling people he's scared for his safety." I felt the world tilt. That wasn't just petty. That was dangerous. I showed Nate. He sat in silence for a moment, then said, "We need legal advice." I nodded. We weren't going to sue, but we needed a paper trail. We needed to protect ourselves. And I was done hoping he'd stop. He wouldn't. This wasn't a sibling rivalry. It was a one-sided war. And I had finally decided to fight back. Not with rage, but with boundaries, records, and the truth. Dean was going to learn something very soon. The story he was spinning, it had consequences. If this story touches you, drop a number 1 in the comments. Every one reminds us that these stories matter, and it gives us the motivation to keep sharing them with you. The Monday after my uncle's warning about Dean claiming I threatened him, I left work early. Not because I was scared, but because I knew I couldn't wait for the next blow to land. I had to act. By 3 p.m., I was sitting in a small law office in downtown Santa Rosa, my fingers wrapped tight around a manila folder of bank statements and screenshots. The attorney, Megan Carlisle, was in her early 40s. Sharp, calm, and refreshingly no-nonsense. After I explained the situation, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This isn't a lawsuit waiting to happen. It's a liability wildfire. You've done the right thing by coming in." I nodded, grateful for the validation. "I'm not trying to ruin him," I said. "I just want to protect myself." Megan tapped her pen thoughtfully. "We'll start with a cease and desist. He's been defaming you, online and offline. We'll make it very clear that if he continues, legal action will follow." I exhaled. It felt good to have someone professional in my corner. And it wasn't just legal protection I needed, it was emotional backup too. Later that week, I went out for drinks with a few coworkers. I almost skipped, but Carla, the receptionist, insisted. "I think you need a win," she said. "Even if it's just sangria and nachos." She was right. At the bar, surrounded by laughter and casual chatter, I felt something I hadn't in months: lightness. We talked about clinic drama, patient quirks, celebrity gossip, and then, at one point, Carla leaned over and said, "You know, a lot of us read your article. We've seen your brother's TikToks, and we're with you." I blinked. "You are?" "Of course. You're one of the kindest people here, and you've worked your butt off. Don't let some narcissist with a guitar and a grudge define your narrative." That night, I drove home and cried in the driveway, not because I was sad, but because I finally realized I wasn't alone. Dean had noise, but I had truth. And now, community. Over the next week, momentum started shifting. My op-ed kept circulating. A woman I didn't know messaged me on LinkedIn. "Thank you for writing what so many of us have lived through. I cut off my brother last year. Your words gave me peace I didn't know I needed." The message was short, but it hit hard. I wasn't just reclaiming my own story. I was making space for others to do the same, but not everyone was clapping. My mom texted again. I hope you're proud. Your brother's embarrassed. Your father is stressed. You've torn the family apart. I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to defend myself to her. Instead, I forwarded the text to Megan. She'd told me to document everything. Her reply came fast. Let this fuel your resolve. They are manipulating you emotionally because they're losing power. And she was right. For years, I'd let guilt run the show. I'd bent backward to keep my parents from discomfort. I'd said yes when I meant no. Not anymore. With Megan's help, I sent Dean a cease and desist letter. The language was direct. Any further slander, online or otherwise, would result in legal action. 2 days later, Dean posted a vague TikTok. When people can't control you, they try to silence you. I didn't reply, didn't comment, didn't engage. Let him shout into the void. I had bigger things to focus on, like my startup's new partnership deal, which was finally going through after 6 months of negotiations. At the signing meeting, one of the partners, a sharp woman named Chloe, pulled me aside. I saw your article, she said. You've got guts. Thank you, I said, slightly stunned. She smiled. Most people hide their mess. You owned yours. That's leadership. I floated out of that office like I had wings. When I got home, Nate had set out champagne. Real, not the kind Dean had thrown across our dessert table. He kissed my forehead. We're turning a corner, Liv. And we were. For the first time in what felt like forever, my life didn't revolve around damage control. I was planning again. Living again. I joined a local women's entrepreneur group. I started working with a therapist. I even blocked Dean and my parents from my phone. Something I once thought would feel like cutting off oxygen. It felt like clearing the air. Then one afternoon, Carla knocked on my office door at the clinic. There's someone here asking for you. Who? She shrugged. Didn't say. She looks nervous. I stepped out and saw her, a girl in her early 20s, standing awkwardly by the front counter. Are you Olivia? Yes? I'm sorry to show up like this. My name's Danny. I used to date your brother. I blinked. Okay. He told me awful things about you, she said quickly. That you stole from him. That you blackballed him from the music industry. I believed him at first, but then I saw your article and the cease and desist post, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was stunned. I think he's sick, she added quietly. Not just manipulative, like actually not okay. Thank you, I said, my voice soft. I hope you keep speaking up, Danny said. You're helping more people than you know. She left before I could even ask more, but her words stuck with me. Dean wasn't just spiraling, he was dragging people into his chaos. And some of them were waking up and climbing out. I couldn't save him, but I could protect myself. And maybe, in doing so, show others how to protect themselves too. That night, I sat on the porch with Nate, staring out over the dark hills of Santa Rosa. He reached for my hand. You look lighter. I am. I had weathered the storm. And now? Now I was building something new. Not from guilt, not from duty, but from strength. The next part of my life wouldn't be about surviving. It would be about thriving. And I wasn't looking back. I should have known Dean wouldn't go down quietly. For a few weeks after the cease and desist letter, he stayed silent. No TikToks, no late-night rants, not even a passive-aggressive post. It was almost eerie. I knew better than to relax. On the first Saturday of May, Nate and I drove down to San Francisco for a weekend getaway. We were overdue for a break, a real one, not just a takeout dinner in front of the TV. We booked a boutique hotel in Nob Hill and had dinner reservations at a rooftop sushi place. I was just slipping on a pair of heels when my phone buzzed. 5 missed calls. all from Carla. I called her back immediately. "Liv," she said, breathless, "have you seen what's happening online?" "No." She paused. "Your brother just went live. Again. This time he brought your parents on camera." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "You're kidding. I wish I were." I hung up and opened Instagram. And there it was. A live stream still going. Over 2,000 viewers tuned in. Dean was in our childhood backyard. I recognized the weathered wooden fence and lemon tree, sitting between our parents like some twisted version of a family talk show. "I never wanted to go public," he was saying, voice soft, practiced. "But I feel like I have no choice." Dad nodded solemnly beside him. "It's been painful watching the family unravel." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I stared, heart pounding, as Dean continued. "She's turned the internet against me. She's threatened me. She's isolated our parents, all because I needed help. That's all. Just a little support." He looked directly into the camera. "She's trying to erase me, but I won't be erased." It wasn't just a lie. It was a full-blown performance. The comments poured in, some calling him brave, others questioning his version of events. A few even mentioned my article, but Dean skillfully dodged specifics, keeping the focus on how family should stick together. I wanted to scream. Instead, I hit record on my screen. Let him dig his own hole. Nate came over, watching the video silently. Then he said, "It's time." I nodded. We didn't go to dinner. We ordered room service and spent the night drafting a follow-up post. Not a rant, not a counterattack, just the truth. I opened with a clip from Dean's livestream, him claiming I'd threatened him. Then I added screenshots of his texts, the ones where he demanded money and accused me of ruining his career. I blurred out parts for privacy. I wasn't out to humiliate, just to expose. Then I added the footage from our security camera, the one from my birthday party. There it was in HD, Dean smashing the champagne flute, lunging at Nate, knocking over the cake, and yelling at me in front of everyone. The sound was unmistakable. "You think you're better than me? You've always been a stuck-up bitch." I ended the video with a simple caption. I've tried to stay quiet, but when someone lies loudly, sometimes silence looks like guilt. This is what really happened. I'm not asking for pity. I'm just done being his scapegoat. I posted it on TikTok and Instagram. Nate posted it too, as did Carla and a few coworkers. Within hours, it took off. The comments flooded in. At first, a mix. But then people began recognizing the pattern. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the public victimhood. One user wrote, "This is classic narcissistic behavior. Thank you for showing receipts." Another, "I'm so sorry, Olivia. This video broke my heart and gave me strength. I cut off my sister last year for the same reason." By morning, the video had over 300,000 views. Dean tried to respond with another live, but this time it backfired. People flooded his comments with timestamps, receipts, and side-by-side comparisons. "You said you were shoved, but there's literal video showing you lunging. Why are you still blaming your sister when she paid your rent for years?" By noon, he ended the stream early. That evening, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was from Danny, his ex, the same girl who'd visited me at work weeks ago. "Just saw everything. I'm proud of you. I know how hard that was." I didn't reply, but I smiled. Dean had spent years trying to control the narrative, but now the truth had taken root, and there was no uprooting it. A few days later, I heard from Megan. "Just got a call from an entertainment blogger," she said. "They're looking into defamation claims. Want me to proceed?" I hesitated. "No," I said finally. "Let him fade out on his own. This isn't about punishment. It's about peace." She agreed. "And you've already won." She was right. I didn't need a courtroom to validate me. The truth had already done its job. That night, I walked through our backyard in Santa Rosa, the same yard where Dean had embarrassed me months ago. The lemon tree swayed in the breeze. Nate stood on the deck, grilling vegetables, music playing low. "Almost ready," he called. I wrapped my arms around myself, taking it all in. This was what I fought for. Peace, honesty, space to breathe. Dean could spin his stories to whoever would listen. But me? I was finally free. A week after Dean's livestream imploded, the silence was refreshing. No new posts, no texts, no calls from my parents. It was like someone finally turned off the faucet after years of constant dripping. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel dread when I picked up my phone. Life began to feel normal again. Not the old normal, but something new. Something healthier. Nate and I kept our promise. We booked that trip to Colorado Springs we'd been talking about for months. Just the two of us, hiking Garden of the Gods, sipping hot coffee on a crisp morning patio, laughing like we hadn't in ages. One night, after a long soak in the resort hot tub, Nate looked over and said, "You know, I barely recognized you a few months ago." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You were always exhausted, carrying everything, your job, your brother, your parents, and pretending you weren't drowning. But now, you look lighter. Like yourself again." I didn't say anything right away. I let the steam rise and the stars settle above us. He was right. Cutting off Dean hadn't just been about stopping the noise. It was about remembering who I was without it. When we got back to Santa Rosa, I made a decision. I sat down with a fresh notebook, the kind I usually use to plan out marketing strategies for the firm, and wrote one name at the top: family. Then I drew a line down the middle. On the left, I wrote who I was expected to be: the fixer, the wallet, the bridge. On the right, who I choose to be now: the boundary setter, the truth teller, the protector of my peace. I stared at the page for a long time, and then I did something I hadn't let myself do in years. I cried. Not out of grief, not even anger. It was relief. A release. That weekend, I finally emailed my parents. Not a long message, just enough to say I was taking a break from contact. I made it clear there was no malice, just space. I wished them well, and I meant it, but I didn't ask for anything in return. The next day, my mom responded with one sentence: "We hope you find what you're looking for." That was it, and I think that was the moment I realized I already had. 2 months later, I was back at work, standing in front of our small marketing team, wrapping up a client pitch, when Carla pulled me aside. "Guess who applied for the open assistant role?" she whispered. "Don't tell me." She nodded. "Dean." My stomach didn't even flinch. She handed me the application. His resume was padded with fake credits, made-up gigs, exaggerated titles. Under references, he'd listed a music manager I knew had dropped him months ago. "He still thinks he can just wiggle his way in," Carla said, shaking her head. "Trash it," I said, handing it back. "We don't need that energy here." And that was that. No rage, no revenge fantasy. Just a boundary. Plain and simple. Dean didn't get the message. Not right away, at least. A few weeks later, he posted a video again. A comeback of sorts. But this time, something was different. The comments weren't full of sympathy. People had seen the receipts. The tone had shifted. "Maybe try being accountable for once. Your sister literally helped you for years. Let it go. Not everything is a sob story." After that, his engagement dropped. Views trickled. His brand crumbled the same way it had been built, quickly and without substance. Meanwhile, I was building something real. In July, Nate and I hosted a backyard cookout. Nothing fancy, just a few close friends, some grilled veggies, lemonade, and a lot of laughter. As the sun dipped behind the redwoods, Carla clinked her glass. "To Olivia," she said, raising it high, "for finally living her best damn life." Everyone cheered. I looked around at the people who showed up. Not because they were obligated, but because they wanted to. That was the difference. Family, I realized, isn't about blood. It's about alignment, about respect, about mutual care. Later that night, Nate and I sat under the string lights, the same ones he'd hung for my birthday so many months ago. Before the explosion, before the glass, before the screaming. He reached for my hand. "We made it," he said softly. And we had. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd finally stopped trying to fix what was never mine to heal. I wasn't a villain. I wasn't a savior. I was just a woman who chose peace and built a life around it. So here's what I'll say to anyone reading this. Anyone who's ever been the fixer in their family, the one who absorbs the chaos. You don't owe anyone your sanity. You don't have to keep proving your worth. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your joy, even if it means disappointing the people who taught you to disappear. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it, and now I live it. Every single day. Olivia.